There's some fascinating research out there that shows that just having one contact point with a school counselor for a student is more likely to increase the likelihood that they're going to go to college. Just one contact.
This shows the power of small groups. Is they said to us, we've seen these kids in this group all the time. And we had no idea they were having the same struggles as we were. They felt like they were the only ones having these same concerns about college preparation. They hadn't realized that it was normal. Everything that they were experiencing was normal.
Welcome to From Classroom to Campus, the podcast that celebrates the incredible work happening in education. I'm your host, Philip Bates, and as always, I've got the wonderful producer, Megan Blessing, with me. This is Season 2, Episode 1, Redefining College Readiness, How Two Professors Are Empowering Students and Counselors. I'm joined today by Dr. Krista Mallot and Dr. Stacey Havlik from Villanova University. Two leaders in counseling education who are rethinking what it really takes for students to succeed after high school. We're talking about their book, Skill Building for Postsecondary Success, and real-world strategies that help first-generation and marginalized students not just get to college, but truly thrive. If you're an educator, a counselor, or a parent, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So let's jump on in. Ladies, how we doing today?
Doing good. Thank you very much. Great intro.
Thanks for having us.
It's absolutely our pleasure. So we like to start with little hook, line, and thinker questions. These are kind of fun icebreaker questions to get the audience a chance to, connect with you and get to know you. Krista, I'll start with you. What is a common myth about counseling you wish would just disappear?
Common myth about counseling I wish would just disappear. I would say especially school counseling. There is this myth that we sort of just sit in our offices and maybe drink coffee. And so maybe it's more of a misunderstanding of what we're trained to do. We have a master's degree, and even some of my colleagues when I worked in the schools didn't even know that we actually had a degree in counseling, or even my principal would say, who do I talk to if I have a suicidal kid? It's like, I'm trained to do that too. And so, I think it's more like a misunderstanding, but we are trained to do some great stuff in the schools.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the big thing is the things that sometimes you're tasked to do, that changing schedules and, coaching students through certain things, you'd really like to spend time supporting students. And that's the most important aspect of it. Absolutely.
Huge.
All right, Stacey, what's the funniest or most unexpected thing a student ever taught you?
Sure. So when we were facilitating this group that led us to writing this book, we asked our students what kind of snacks they wanted, because we felt like if we're coming in from the outside, we've got to be able to connect with the students and make sure that we give them a little bit more incentive to come to our group. And we kind of expected, because they were high schoolers, we thought, they're going to want candy and chips, and we were prepared for that. And they all wanted fruit and all this healthy food. So that was kind of shocking and funny to us that I guess the lesson is you got to ask. Maybe it was just this particular group, but they wanted the fruit. So it's something we had to think about.
Hey, man, they're all about brain health. I like
That's
that.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
All right, Krista, what's one piece of advice that counselors hear all the time, but secretly think, oh, that's not quite right?
Yes. Stacey and I have actually talked about this one before. There is this old, I don't know if it's a wives' tale or whatever, but this idea that, when a client is angry, just tell them to go punch a pillow to get all their anger out. And that's going to make them feel better. And actually the research has shown the opposite, that if you're angry and you're punching things, it actually arouses your physical, physiology or your physical response, and it increases or exacerbates the issue. And so that is not the best solution to dealing with your anger.
I just learned something. I think I must have been told to go punch a pillow a few times.
Yeah, sure.
That's excellent. All right, Stacey, if you could erase one buzzword from the college readiness conversation forever, what would it be?
Yeah, one thing that we hear is the importance of teaching non-cognitive or soft skills to students. And these are the skills that, college readiness includes the skills like applying to schools and financial aid. But when we think about the soft skills or non-cognitive skills, those are skills beyond that, like writing professional emails, study skills, time management. But we hate those words. Soft skills, non-cognitive skills don't quite match with what we're looking for. So the term that we prefer is life readiness skills. So the skills that students need to be prepared for life and be prepared for success in college.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that a lot because I think that's going to be super important for our conversation today. Okay, Krista, what's one habit students underestimate that makes the biggest difference in college success?
Well, the basis of our book is all about asking for help. And how do you ask for help and where do you ask for help and when? And so definitely it's that asking for help. One of the things our Villanova students told us when we asked our first gen college going Villanova students, like, what's the one big thing that you feel like has helped you be successful, is they said asking for help from someone as far as being a mentor. Approaching someone and being like, I want you to mentor me, help me get through college, help me find a career, help me find an internship. And we were really impressed with how these students had just developed that skill of asking.
I love that. And I've got to have a follow-up question because I need some parenting advice. I've got a 17-year-old senior, and one of the biggest things I have conversations with them about is, I think seniors tend to be overconfident. I think that overconfidence sometimes is really just secretly, they don't want people to think they don't know what they're talking about. But what's the best way to encourage or support students asking for advice, specifically maybe high school seniors, boys? Right.
And there's this story that boys especially are given that you should just be able to do everything on your own. You're a wuss if you ask for help. And yes, but I also have a daughter that is the same way, who's a senior right now, who will not ask me for help or my husband. And so I'm feeling that for you. One of the ways that we have done it in our book is the idea of encouraging the adults in the community, in the school, modeling asking for help, modeling messing up. And so when we had our students facilitating the groups in West Philly schools, we said, talk to them about how you went out and you went to counseling because you needed help. As a male, you went to counseling because you were struggling emotionally. Talk to them about how you had to get help and how to read a syllabus when you got to college, and you failed a test when you got to college. Just let them know we all make mistakes, but then here's where we went to ask for help afterwards. So model
that. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. All right, Krista, tell us about a book or training you'd recommend. Actually, this is for Stacey. Sorry. Stacey, tell us about a book or training you'd recommend outside of your book, obviously. Tell us about a book or training you'd recommend every counselor read or attend.
Sure. I love the book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's by Bessel van der Kolk. So it talks about how physical trauma, that if you've experienced trauma, how it actually rewires the brain, and especially youth who have experienced trauma. And so when we think about working with youth who have experienced trauma, rethinking how we support them, because they really their brain may have been rewired if they had experienced trauma. And so when we think of students and we look at them like, oh, they're a behavior problem, or they don't want to be here, or they're skipping school because they hate school, or they don't care to be successful, tends to not be the case. The students experience a serious issue, and there's going to be long-term changes in their brain. And so this book is just an awesome resource to rethink how we work with students and think about those lasting issues and the difficulty maybe students might have building trust because they had experienced trauma.
Can I cheat and piggyback off of her?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there is a fabulous book that builds off of Bessel van der Kolk's work. It's called Raising Kids with Big Baffling Behaviors. Robin Gobbel, Gobbel, is an amazing autistic advocate, but she wrote this book mainly for parents and practitioners. So taking that trauma and seeing this is what trauma looks like, a kid who maybe has school refusal or doing things that are big baffling behaviors, but really understanding why it's related to trauma, but then giving tons of suggestions of things that we can do as educators and also as parents. It's one of the main books that I've really used for parenting my own child who had a lot of trauma and some stuff with autism. And so it's been a fabulous kind of sort of accompaniment to that concept.
And I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but we talk a lot about individualizing our approaches with students. And this is an important piece of it, understanding the students, their background, and what experiences they had before they came to working with us.
Love that. Yeah, appreciate the suggestions. We'll include those links in the episode because I'm sure people want to check those out. All right, folks, well, let's dive in here. I'm super curious. I've got maybe a tiny little bit when we talked before, but how the two of you guys cross paths and what kind of inspired this very wonderful, collaborative, professional, relationship?
Sure. So I've been at Villanova for, I think, 13 or 14 years now. And Krista was there before I arrived. So when I came, we started, she mentored me as an assistant professor, and we would have lunches and hang out and became friends and colleagues. And we always joke because every time I feel like we'd have lunch, we would leave lunch with 3 other studies that we were going to do together. And so our brainstorming and conversations, we just can play off each other and come up with ideas and think of big ideas and big projects that we could do in ways that we can support students. We're both former school counselors, so we have a lot in common in how we support our teaching and our students at Villanova. And so just we connected through work and through connecting in our similar passion to help youth from various backgrounds and to support students going to college, but also support students just in K through 12 settings too.
Yeah. Awesome. So just like teaching is a calling, it's a passion, and it's fun to kind of hear people's stories. Counseling, I think, is the same way. What inspired, both of you to become counselors and to kind of dive into that?
Yeah. So honestly, I think my experiences in my youth as a child, that there was some chaos in my home and some stressors in my home. And I wish I would have had someone to go speak to. But we didn't have school counselors that spoke to or worked with our social emotional stuff. They were very good at sort of the college stuff. And so I was really inspired to want to become that counselor who really noticed the kids who were struggling and really supported and lifted them up. I wanted to be that person. And that's sort of what drove me on to become a school counselor, is to want to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. And for me, it was when I was an undergrad, I was working in camps, whether it was in a coaching relationship with students or working with camps in educational environments, and realizing that I wanted to work in a school setting, but I didn't necessarily want to teach because I wanted to do the social emotional work as well. So as counselors, we do the career college, we do the academic and the social emotional. So learning more about the role of a school counselor as I developed in my educational journey, I realized it was a perfect fit because I was able to do all 3 and support students in different ways. And I was always interested in working within the system too. So as a school counselor, you work with the family, you work with the community, you work with the school. And so you're able to really function across different systems. And so as we know, a student isn't just themselves, they function in a whole system. And so being able to work with that really, I think, can make a big difference. And that really led me to the work of a school counselor.
Yeah, I'd just be so curious to see how many people in counseling and education worked summer camp at some point.
Yes.
I think summer camp led many of us, it led me to education.
Yes.
So, yeah. Because we had great experiences as kids, and then you want to provide that as a counselor, and you go, I like this. I like being around, students and doing these things. That's great.
Yeah. I think I remember being like, I want to work with kids. Like, this is super fun, but I don't know what I want to do with it. And then as I learned about the role of the school counselor, it was a perfect fit.
Yeah, I was lucky. I had the head of the camp was an elementary teacher, and he was a dude, and I didn't know dudes could be elementary teachers. Nice. And so that kind of helped me go, you get to do this all year round, kind of.
Yeah,
so it's
the role
fun.
modeling.
Absolutely. So, during your high school counseling days, what shaped your research now? Like what did you pull from the high school counseling days to when you dove into the research that you guys do today?
So for me, I predominantly worked in a school with Mexican and Mexican-American kids, predominantly, for most of my school counseling career, and also kids that were struggling, their families were struggling financially. And so I think what I really started seeing were these experiences of inequities that they were facing, the barriers that they were facing because they didn't have access to the resources that maybe the wealthier school districts did, the wealthier schools, wealthier families, et cetera. And so I really got passionate about how do we address those inequities so that kids can access sort of the best kind of quality of life possible? And if that's, whatever they want to achieve, that they can achieve. And so really it was about all of those sort of awarenesses that we need greater justice and equity.
Interesting. Yeah. Stacey, how about you?
For me, I was working, it came from working in a middle school, actually. I was working in a middle school and I had students experiencing homelessness on my caseload. And I hadn't at that point really had much training on working with students experiencing homelessness or training with first generation college students. It hadn't been part of my master's work. And so it really inspired me to pursue research on how do we train counselors and educators to support youth who are from low income backgrounds or experiencing homelessness or first generation college students.
So similar. I mean, I would say both your backgrounds, kind of that synergy kind of came together of, I don't want to say, rooting for the underdog, but supporting maybe, students that needed the support. And then I like what you said, Stacey, about supporting the process and that being, part of what the research. And of course, the research, I guess that leads you to write the book. Or do you come up with a book idea and then you start doing the research? How does that work?
Well, it started with going to lunch, and, like it always does with our studies. Yes. And we were discussing our own challenges with working with first generation graduate students and students in our own classes. And so we thought, it would be great because we're hearing from our students some of the struggles they were having. Like, oh, I don't know who to go for help. I don't know how to navigate this college environment or who to speak to. So we thought, well, what is lacking in college preparation? Because as I mentioned, those life readiness skills, we were wondering, are students not getting these life readiness skills that help you to understand how to navigate a college environment, how to talk to professors, what to do in office hours, how to study for exams, things like that. And so when we started talking about this, we thought, well, let's gather some evidence first to see if this is needed. And so we talked to our own students and undergraduate students who were first generation college and asked them what they needed and what they felt like they didn't have. And a lot of it was what we thought, that, they didn't know where to go to ask for help. So we're saying you need to ask for help, and they don't necessarily know who do I go or where do I go to ask for that. And thinking about how to support those students, we decided, well, we wanted at that point, because we've been at Villanova for a while, we missed working as school counselors in schools. So we thought, well, why don't we develop an intervention and we can facilitate it within the school? First, gather some data to see how effective it is based on the voices of our students in undergrad who were experiencing these challenges. And so we developed a research-based group and ran it within a school, within the school district of Philadelphia. And we continued to facilitate that group with the support of other students and training our graduate students to facilitate it after that, which then led to, well, we have all this evidence of this group and how effective it is. Let's write it down.
Yeah, we have multiple articles first from it with evidence. And then it's been used in multiple schools and a few different school districts. And then we thought, well, let's just put it all together in a book because it's just so user-friendly. So.
Yeah, I love the idea. And I love how I guess you kind of stumble into, we were recognizing that our students around us, our undergrad students are struggling with these skills. Well, they're struggling with them because they weren't taught in high school. And they weren't taught in high school not because they don't want to teach them. Maybe just there's not that identified need or the time or the probably the tools is probably the best way to put it. How do you take the research and the real life practical application and put that into this wonderful toolbox for counselors?
Yeah, so it was. I mean, the Villanova students. We had multiple small focus groups, and then we interviewed them, and we asked them things also about what are your strengths as a first gen, what are your struggles, what is your experience like as a first gen, and so we got so much rich data that we took a lot of the literature that's out there already, and we used some of that to design the groups. But we really took a lot of those real life experiences of our Villanova students, and then we said, okay, we've got 20 years of research on first gen that we're drawing from. We've got the experiences of actual first gen here that we're drawing from. So let's develop a set of 8 group sessions. And so we really based it on, as much of like the evidence as we could. And then we went into the schools. And then as the students would say, we liked this, we didn't like this wasn't helpful, this was helpful. Then we sort of started melding the groups a little bit according to that experience with actual high school students at that point. So it's sort of a culmination of all of those sort of different inputs, and really just trying to be, what are you not getting? Where are the holes that we need to fill that you're not getting when it comes to being prepared to go on to and to persist and thrive in college?
What surprised you the most when you met with these groups?
That's a good question.
One thing I think that stood out to me is as we were gathering data at the end, our first time we ran the groups, and we've heard this over and over since, but the first run at the end, the students said to us, and our assumption was they all kind of knew each other beforehand. And I think this shows the power of small groups, is they said to us, we had no idea. We've seen these kids in this group all the time, and we had no idea they were having the same struggles as we were. Mm-hmm. So I think we kind of assumed they all feel like they know that everybody's struggling, but they didn't. Mm-hmm. They felt like they were the only ones having these same concerns about college preparation, and they hadn't realized that it was normal. Everything that they were experiencing was normal.
Yeah, as opposed to thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just figure this out on my own? What surprised me is so many of them had gotten the message, sometimes from parents, sometimes from teachers, sometimes from society in general. Don't ask for help. It's not okay to ask for help. You should do everything on your own. And these students were so high functioning; they had done a lot of things on their own. They survived. Sure. They thrived. So that idea of like they're getting these messages that it's not okay to ask for help from so many different resources, and so fighting that dominant narrative was really tough.
It had to be super therapeutic just for them to be in these groups to see that they're all with the same challenges and all struggling with the same things.
Definitely.
It was very powerful.
I think the value of, we designed it as these groups can be run as classroom interventions, but also small groups. And I think a lot of college counseling is done in the broader classroom environment. But I think there's such a power in doing college counseling in smaller groups because of that factor, because they can learn that everybody's going through this. This is the same, we're experiencing similar experiences, and it just might feel different based on my experience and my background. But it just shows, I think, the power of small group interventions for college counseling, and not always just relying on classroom lessons for counselor or for students.
Yeah, small group really allows them to really self-disclose a lot more. They feel safer self-disclosing as they build relationship, of course. But then you've got this really close relationship that they build because it's a small group. They start sharing. Then they started talking about how they're supporting each other outside of the group, how they're starting to succeed as a group outside of the group. And so they've got those built-in supports now when we're done with the group and we leave.
So once those groups have finished and concluded, you surely track how these folks are doing. Like, tell me about the data and the success. I'd love to hear about the success after these groups.
So what you're bringing up is a challenge of longitudinal data collection in higher education.
Gotcha.
And so while we have attempted to follow up with students long-term after the groups, it remains and has been difficult for us to get long-term data because they go off to college and then they don't want to return our messages or
lots of outreach.
So unfortunately, we can tell you that from start to finish of the group, but in terms of a year or two later, we've struggled to gather that data.
Yeah.
Those data.
That makes sense. They scatter, hopefully successfully. I'm sure successfully, but they scatter successfully.
Yeah. Certainly one of the things that we've found during the study is that students will start reporting to us ways they're applying the group skills we're teaching them immediately in their school setting, which I was not expecting. Like, okay, yeah, I started going and asking my teacher for help. I started using the study skill we talked about. I started talking to such and such. And it was like, wow, we didn't expect them to just go right out there and start using those skills right away, but they were. Yeah. So we did hear back about that.
Good. So let's talk about high school counselors, the million of things that they've got, the myriad of things they've got to, handle. And one of the big things is college readiness and preparing students. We don't like to say soft skills, but those college readiness skills that, how to do an application, how to, prepare themselves with standardized testing, all that sort of thing. Is there a core thing that a high school counselor should keep in mind when it comes to preparing students for college readiness?
I believe it all comes down to providing individualized counseling. So we've talked about trauma so far in our conversation today. We've talked about systemic barriers. We've talked about students who are experiencing homelessness and first-generation college students. And so sometimes some students need different types of support. So a student who can afford a private college counselor is going to get a lot of different supports than a student who is experiencing homelessness, for example. And so I think it's really important that school counselors understand the students on their caseload and are able to provide that individualized counseling when it comes to college counseling for students. Now, there's a range of reasons why they don't do it, because obviously school counselors would love to provide in-depth individualized school counseling or college counseling to all students. But if they have a large caseload, that's going to be really hard to do. And for students who are experiencing different types of challenges, it may be hard for counselors to have the time to commit to them if they have a wide range of other responsibilities. But to me, that I feel like is having highly trained college counselors or school counselors who are highly trained in career counseling who can provide support that is individualized to their needs and tailored to their needs is critical.
There's some fascinating research out there that shows that just having one contact point with a school counselor for a student, one contact point where the counselor asks, have you thought about post-secondary? What are you going to do? Is more likely to increase the likelihood that they're going to go to college. Just one contact. But if you have a caseload of 450 students, you can't do even one contact with each student. And so many students fall through the crack. But just that one contact makes a world of a difference.
Yeah. So no one size fits all, obviously. Any tricks to, if you've got a large caseload, if there's a counselor right now listening to this, high school counselor saying, that's me, I've got 420 kids on my caseload. Any tricks to try to have those touch points or any strategies that you'd recommend?
I think you had to draw on your state resources and your community resources. So there's a lot of great college preparation resources out there and programs that will come into your school and provide more in-depth college counseling. And so just understanding what your state has, what community resources are available, and free resources for students is important. We've seen a lot of different models of this within schools, and where some of the individualized counseling is coordinated, or college counseling is coordinated by the school counselor, but it's not necessarily all provided by the school counselor. So they might be working with a program who comes into the school, meets individually or one-on-one with students, and then they coordinate those services. So it's always about partnerships and building partnerships and relationships with and knowing your resources.
Sure.
I would add to that. When I was a school counselor, at one point, I created a mentorship program where the parents were vetted, of course, but then they would come in and they would have 3 students they would mentor and then meet with them, say 3 times even. And we were training them to do that, to just, where are you thinking about going? How can I support you? What do you need? And then the other thing I'll say, of course, is if you can't do one-on-one, that group piece and how important you can pull in, like when we were working with kids in West Philly, they had a lot of similarities. So if you could pull them together where they have some shared similarities, like these kids were all first gen. These kids all identified as BIPOC, so they were individuals of color. And so we were able to sort of tailor some similarities and address some issues like how do you deal with racism when you get to college, for instance? It's going to happen. And how are you going to deal with not knowing how to ask for help? And so the small group can still be successful in like asking them these questions and preparing them, if you can't do the one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
Those are fantastic suggestions. I love that. So we'll stick with college readiness for a little bit. Besides doing this podcast, we do a ton of college readiness materials, both AP, SAT, ACT, that sort of thing. I'm curious from your high school days and helping students prepare for big exams like that, what did you feel what your role was for students to understand how AP worked, how SAT worked, how ACT worked?
Hmm. Well, it was sort of a whole group class educational process, and just talking to them about that and what are the differences and how do you prepare and what do you think about. And also within one school I worked in, we actually had study skills groups, even the idea of how do you take multiple choice exams, how do you prepare for them. Students that have resources now just pay these test centers to be trained to take a test well, right? But that's not always true of a lot of students. So offering some of those supports within school systems as well. Yeah.
I feel like what we try to do now is to make things very equitable for students, because you don't have the student who can go out and spend thousands of dollars on tutoring, thousands of dollars on preparation for this. That students should be able to kind of take that on their own with the right content, the right product, and we try to pull something like that off. I think the other challenge is counselors know a great deal about standardized testing, but teachers tend to not know a great deal about standardized testing. So once again, it kind of falls to counselors to kind of provide all that support.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I find that traditional test prep can feel like busy work. 1,000 questions here, 1,000 more there, and not much learning in between. UWorld takes a smarter approach. Our prep for the SAT and ACT gives students meaningful practice under time conditions, explains why they miss questions, and builds the skills that lead to real score gains. Educators love UWorld because it bridges assessment and instruction, turning practice into actual learning. Visit collegereadiness.uworld.com and empower your students with practice that teaches. All right, so let's talk about first-gen marginalized students. It's a passion that you guys have. What are some of the barriers and challenges that counselors experience when working with students with those challenges?
Yeah, we've mentioned this a couple times already, but the high student to counselor ratio. So the American School Counseling Association recommends 250 to 1. So 250 students to every one counselor. That's recommended, but that's not always practiced. I know some schools that are 800 to 1. So that's challenging. If you're under that ratio, if you have 250 to 1, you can manage that. But if you have much higher numbers, that's going to pose a huge barrier for counselors to be able to do their work effectively.
Sure.
And I would say another part of it too is counselors get a lot of, we're trained to do academic, social, emotional, and college counseling. And counselors are often doing a lot of administrative tasks like,
proctoring a test.
Yes, coordinating, being a test coordinator, being a 504 coordinator. And while they can
changing schedules, all that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's work that it takes them away from their ability to do that individualized work that we've been focused on. So I think, understanding, because it tends to come from top down, if administrators understand the role of school counselors and can help ensure that they're doing the jobs that they've been trained to do with manageable caseloads, they can really support and provide that individualized work and support that students need. And, if our first gen students need more individualized support, more study skills, more academic skills, college counseling, then you can do that if you have the resources and you have the time. But if you're overloaded with test coordinating and other things and things that are taking away from your ability to do your job, it becomes really difficult.
Yeah, I think that time theme is really coming through in our conversation, and the counselors that I worked with have always felt that way. They've always struggled with that. And so what are some high impact things that counselors can do with limited amount of time that will have a positive impact on students?
Yeah. I think one of the things that Stacey mentioned before is just leveraging the community resources. So for instance, when I was a school counselor, I would bring in social workers who would facilitate different kinds of activities and groups and really identifying those students most at need for particular resources. How can I bring folks in or refer folks out? It takes a whole village, right? And so it's really a lot of interfacing with what's going on out there that we can really get students connected to those resources is one idea.
We also train our students now in multi-tiered systems of support. So the tier 1 interventions that all students get, and then determine what students need some more. And that's, our students who will get our small groups and more individualized counseling. And then for our students who are elevated to tier 3 who need more intensive services, then we provide resources out. So I think looking at our students from a tiered approach, not every student needs individualized support, but we can have a role and make sure that they get the academic, personal, social, emotional, and career and college support. But the students who need more, we may need to provide them more or have them higher up on the tier system.
Sure. You guys talked about, helping students realize when they need to go out and seek support, when they need to, have a mentor, ask a good question. There's a bunch of other skills that we could talk about, financial awareness, the ability to budget, the ability to pick up the phone and make an appointment, all those other skills. How does that play into, having a student successful for college?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, some of those topics we do definitely touch on in our groups. But that's also, the idea of asking students what they feel like they need to learn, and seeing if students are interested in other things beyond just what we're offering them. And certainly, it's interesting. I talk to teachers all the time, and the financial piece, especially like you talked about budgeting, and that comes up a lot for young people, that they have different places that they might learn it, and then some don't learn it at all. And so there are sometimes some school whole courses in some school districts that have implemented that kind of training. And I wish my children had that training at their particular school district, for instance. So I feel like that's such a bigger issue of we need to have an entire course, I feel like, by a teacher at the school setting for the financial piece, especially. The self-advocacy piece and how do we get kids to pick up the phone that you talked about is, I feel like every kid needs to have some of that training. Like, how do you do for yourself? How do you advocate for yourself? And there's a little more support sometimes when kids have disabilities of how do we teach them to advocate for themselves, which I think is fabulous. But do some kids just not get it? I absolutely think they don't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if we look at college readiness, being an unfair system based on your economic background, because it just is. I mean, facts are facts. If you were to design the system from the ground up, how could we make an equitable system?
I'd start with lower counselor-to-student ratios. I've said that over and over again today.
I agree.
More money to school counseling programs, hire more school counselors, make sure that students have that person that they can contact and who's available to them and can provide that individualized support. And making sure that every student, minimum twice a year, has an individual meeting from freshman to senior year where they're doing college counseling and they're preparing for their post-secondary education. And they have someone who knows them, who tracks them, who follows them, and can provide those resources. And then, like our skills group, is teaching those professional and life readiness skills so that everyone from freshman year to senior year are getting these skills. They're learning it on a basic level their freshman year, and then they build up on it as they go. But we can't forget our elementary and middle school kids. If we're in this ideal world, they're also, and I know some states are doing a great job doing this, but they're also getting college readiness and post-secondary readiness lessons starting young so that we have this college readiness culture and this readiness to go when they're ready to graduate. That's an option for students, for all students.
I would build on that too and broaden that out to say, of course, we have such inequity in funding across our school districts, especially in predominantly BIPOC school districts, where you see a larger number of children of color, you have an underfunding of the school district. It's very systematic. And so, looking at that and really trying to right that to make sure that each school district has what it needs. And so that's about the tax-based and how we vote and how we fight for voting. I know in Pennsylvania, we're really trying to fight for that. And then trying to find ways to advocate to have teachers that look like the kids that are, within the districts. And so trying to really encourage more educators of color, for instance. And so trying to find ways from early childhood education all the way through of having more resources that really could make things more equitable.
Yeah. Do you guys, you guys are part of educating, developing, really leading counselors. What is the most important thing that you can instill in a school counselor to help make them be the best school counselor they possibly can be?
One thing we focus on with our students at Villanova when we're training our school counselors is professional advocacy. So advocating for the role of the school counselor. So don't just accept if you're told to be the test coordinator, which is going to take 3 months of your job away, advocate and say, hey, here's the date. Here's what I can do for our students. And my training is to focus on students. And here's what I can do. And identifying your role. So fighting for your role and making sure that you're doing what you're trained to do.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. And for me, it's also training students to have that critical eye so that they can go into the school systems and understand the underlying what's happening with these kids. Why are they acting out? A kid's never a bad kid, but there's something bad happening to them within the context. What is that bad thing? How can I address the system as opposed to putting a Band-Aid over it and just saying, well, just breathe more, or, just be more quiet in the classroom. It's like, well, why are they making so much noise in the classroom? And so really teaching them to think really critically about what's really happening here. Every behavior has a reason behind it, and we need to look for that reason and be curious about it.
Krista and I struggle with the concept of always telling children that they need to breathe more. You need to take deep breaths, learn how to breathe, be mindful. Yeah. When they're fighting against systemic barriers, breathing is not going to make much of a difference. It's going to, for some students it might work, but research shows that it doesn't work for all students. But that seems to be the answer for a lot of individualized counseling. Is breathe.
So I will tell you, I've told a lot of students to calm down and breathe. And it's worked well. Don't ever tell your spouse to calm down and breathe. That never works well.
Or your child. Or your child.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, child, spouse, yes. Yeah. Anybody else's child, no problem. Yeah. Just be careful.
You haven't met my child then.
Yeah.
All right, so we know counselors have a tremendous impact on young people. Can you guys, we love to celebrate educators. We love to celebrate counselors on this podcast. Can you think of a great story where either yourself as a counselor has impacted a student, or you've seen a counselor make a huge difference in a child's path?
Mm-hmm. So we mentioned how we've facilitated this group across different settings. And every time that we do this group, we start with pre and post test data, and we ask what their plans are after they graduate. And without fail, by the end of the group, students who said they had no plans to attend college, by the end of the groups and by the end of the session said, I'm interested now. I want to go to college. I'm interested. So just learning these life readiness skills, learning about college sometimes, especially for first generation college students who may not have been exposed to it before. This is a short intervention. So if school counselors or educators are doing longer term interventions, it can really make a difference in terms of what students can see themselves doing after they graduate.
Yeah, when we asked them about it, they said, it was just an unknown. I didn't know what the bathrooms might be like at college. That one kept coming up over and over again. The terror of what a bathroom is like at college. What is the roommate situation like at college? How do I get food? Where's the food? Those unknowns, we didn't realize it at first, but that's what made them say, no, not for me. No, I'm just not going to even consider college. And so those are easy things that we can do for kids if we have the time to do that. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So what gives you hope when you look at today's generation of students and counselors?
So I have such a wonderful set of students at Villanova University this particular year in special. I don't know why, but I have a graduate group of students I'm working with and an undergraduate group of students. And the students always give me hope because students are wonderful. But I think in particular, these students are just so smart and curious and humble, and they want to do good in the world. They want to, get it right. And so it's just been a pure joy. And so we do a lot of complaining, I think, about the next generation that's coming up, like, all the terrible things about the next generation. And I think it's very common to complain about maybe what we think they don't have that we think that we do have in our generation. So I do really want to talk up I think we've got a great set of young people that really want to make a difference in the world.
Love it.
And I'll add that when we think about college counseling, in the past, school counselors didn't have a lot of extensive college counseling training, which is kind of shocking considering they were going into the field and doing that work, but it wasn't part of their curriculum. And now we're realizing that it needs to be part of the curriculum. So you're seeing better and better trained counselors coming into the field who have had training in college counseling, and counselors in the field now who never had that training, who are getting more training, who have it available to them, who are now prepared to do the work, to do better college counseling for students. So along with our students entering the field, those in the field are getting better prepared to do the work, which is great for our students who are in high school now.
And also the idea that it's not just college, but it's post-secondary opportunities, right?
Yes.
That they are better prepared. And it seems like they're more open to saying, you don't have to go to college. There are so many great other post-secondary opportunities as well. And I feel like there's more openness to that. And there wasn't when I was younger. You either went to college or you just didn't.
And we were intentional with calling this book Post-Secondary Success instead of College Success, because our goal is that every student has the option to go to college, but they can choose other paths as well. So they have these options and they can pick.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily college.
I mean, success ready might be a good term. I mean, you want students to be success ready, and you guys are making a big difference. I mean, I would tell you, not only through educating counselors, but also just supporting high school counselors, which I think is fantastic. So the wonderful Megan, I always miss things and leave things off, and you've also always got great questions. Megan, any questions for these wonderful ladies?
Actually, Joe, who works on our video team, and I are banished to a studio next to Philip. So we've been watching and listening and commenting together. And Joe mentioned that Joe is from Ecuador, and he mentioned he didn't have counselors at his high school. So he's kind of asking me what they did. And I responded to him, I probably talked to my counselor maybe once in high school, and it was about college, and that was it. And just listening to the two of you and talking about how you think there should be a lower counselor to student ratio, what do you think the ideal counselor to student ratio is?
Oh, if we could wave a magic wand, right?
Yes, with a magic wand.
Yeah, the American School Counseling Association says 250 to 1, but if I could wave a magic wand, I would say 150 to 1 would be wonderful, because you could really do the work you wanted to with the students.
And there's certainly some wonderful research showing that the presence of a school counselor, with a small number of students, can change the entire culture of a school.
Wow.
And there are less kids getting reported for disciplinary issues, et cetera. So the school counselor really can make a difference if there is smaller ratios. So I
agree. Yeah, I don't think students know exactly what counselors can do. And that's what I was telling Joe. I was like, you really have to go in and talk to your counselor. You really do as a student, or else you won't know what all they have to offer, just because there are so many students that are there in school compared to the counselors. So,
yes.
Right. And I think it comes, when you think about like asking for help, a lot of students, if the counselor is not, I always try to teach my students, when the bell's ringing, you're out in the hall. At lunchtime, go chat with students. Get yourself known before they need you. And so don't just hide in your office, because, right, like if you don't know who your counselor is, or you're not comfortable going to them, you're not going to go to them when you have a question. You're going to go online or ask your friends, and you wouldn't be comfortable. So I tell my students all the time that the school counselors need to do the trust building work in the middle of the day, in the random times, in the pockets of free time, so that students are comfortable coming to them. And then also tell people what you do. Make sure that everybody knows what they do, so that students know what they can offer.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, guys. I have one more. If counselors have one extra hour per day, how would you want them to use it?
I think group counseling is one of the most powerful interventions I ever ran when I was in the school. And so, the principal determines a lot of what a school counselor is allowed to do or not do. But just having the opportunity to notice those kids who are somehow being pushed out somehow, that they feel like they don't belong for some reason. Maybe they're experiencing bullying, or maybe they have some trauma or whatever, and bringing those kids into the fold by providing these connections with other kids in group, ideally.
And I would add to that, along with group, taking the time to look at the data that they have that shows and the impact of their interventions, that shows checking the needs assessment data, looking at their student population, who needs different supports, identifying the barriers that students have. So really taking the time to check the needs of the students and being intentional with interventions. So when I plan interventions, it's based on the particular needs of my student groups that I'm supporting.
Yeah, I probably would say on top of that, just ask them.
Yeah.
Ask the students what they want. I used to go into each classroom and have students all fill out what are they interested in. And I'd have a whole list of like different resources. And then the teachers too. And it's amazing. They would also often refer their friends to some services too. But yeah, ask them because just that's evidence-based as well.
Right.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you for the questions.
Megan and Joe. All right, Joe, helping out with questions. We love that.
Say hi.
Hi.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you.
Sorry you didn't have school counselors.
That's funny. So, ladies, first off, do we miss anything? Do we cover everything?
There's so many good questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can't say enough about, the power of kids coming together in whatever way they come together. That sense of belonging, is when they connect with each other. And, so I think some of your questions really got to that, that piece of how can we help those kids feel like they belong in the schools through those supports.
And one thing we highlight in our book a lot is about individual student identities. So whether it's gender, race, socioeconomic status, ability status, knowing your individualized student backgrounds and knowing their identities and building interventions based on student identities is so important when we're thinking about college counseling. And how student identity is one thing about our book is we talk about how student identities will impact your college experience. And the experience that you have when you go to college is greatly impacted by the different identities that you have. And you can get supports based on your different identities, and knowing them, recognizing that that's important, I think is a key piece to this book and a key piece to college counseling too. And again, that circles back to the individualized support for students.
Yeah. I mean, the other piece is that the interventions we developed were really focused on how do you understand yourself, to succeed in college. And also they're made to be really fun and interactive. And so they're activities, they're game-like. And so engaging kids in ways that just feel fun, and movement-based role plays, and so just that idea of just getting kids active and their sharing and their participating just really was a lot of fun to facilitate the groups.
Like one thing that we have, for example, is a poorly written email to a professor. And it's one that I received as a professor, like a very, kind of unprofessional email to a professor. And so we give it to the students and we ask them, what's wrong with this? And they have to rewrite it. And so teaching that professional skill of, when you email a professor, you want a formal title, you want to not make assumptions about what they can provide for you. And so just teaching those skills in a fun way, because of course they find the email entertaining and funny, and is important. That, I think sometimes when we teach college counseling, it's someone goes in front of a classroom and they do some slides and they show the slides on all the processes. And I get it because there's so much information they need to learn. But also, I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast has probably worked with youth. and know that their attention span is not very long at all. So you have lost them within 5 minutes. So anytime you do some kind of college preparation, it has to be engaging and it has to be fun. And that's how students will remember it.
Yeah, that's just good instructional practices right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you wouldn't be sitting in the audience engaged, they're definitely not going to be sitting in the audience engaged.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are so passionate and you're so positive, which I love. How can folks learn more about the book, learn more about Villanova, learn more about your research?
Yeah, our book is through the American School Counseling Association. So if you go to publications within the American School Counseling Association, you'll find our book From Classroom, I'm reading the name of the podcast. It's Skill Building for Postsecondary Success as the title of the book. And yeah, you can learn about our school counseling programs, and we have a college counseling certificate program. So for school counselors out there who need more training or want more training on school counseling, we have an online certificate program. So counselors across the country can learn, how to support student athletes and how to do college counseling for students who want highly selective schools and for students who want 2-year schools. So the training is available if you want it, and you can certainly find information at villanova.edu if you search for our program.
That's even for non-counselors as well, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ladies, really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Great to hear, just how passionate you guys are and what you're doing to support students and what you're doing to support counselors. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Well, thank you for the work that you do and getting all these ideas out there. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, you got it. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We love comments. We love suggestions. If you've got a guest that you think I should have on, please let us know. Remember, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. I'm sure you two ladies can appreciate that. So have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
The opinions expressed by our guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views from Classroom to Campus, UWorld, or its affiliates. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating that really helps us out. Thank you so much.